So at this point, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have 5 panelists today to talk about homelessness in general and specifically as related to women. So I'll be introducing them if you guys don't mind. Come on up. Okay, so our guests are Laura Diamond. She's a Palisadian. She's the author of Shelter Us, a novel on homelessness. Brooke Lykins. She's from the Downtown Women's Center, Director of Development. Emily Andrade from West LA VA Outreach. Officer Monique Contreras. You just heard she works with Captain Chamberlain, and she'll be telling us about a new program. Not Captain? Commander. And last but certainly not least, our friend Maureen Rivas. She's one of the 2-member group of OPCC. Well, she's the Palisades outreach group that comes to us from OPCC, but she and Glenda work in the Palisades every day. They do outreach among our Okay, so if you guys don't mind, I'll ask you each to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit, and then I have questions for you, which we'll ask, and of course, we'll then very quickly open it up to the audience to ask questions. Laura, you want to go first?
Okay. Yes, not like Officer Mike. Can you hear me with this? My name is Laura Diamond. I am a lifelong Palisadian, except for a few years of college. But I grew up here. I attended the Palisades schools, and my 2 sons attend Pali High and Pali Elementary. And my background is as a civil rights lawyer, and I recently published a novel which is set in Pacific Palisades. It is called Shelter Us, and it is the story of a mother of 2 young boys who becomes obsessed with a young homeless mother she sees downtown one day, and with trying to save them. And it's the story of how these 2 women end up saving each other. I'll tell you more about it after the introduction. Are we going to sort of hand everybody? Okay.
Yeah, just now.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, my name's Emily Andrade. I'm not a lifelong Palisadian, but it's beautiful here. And I appreciate the honor to get to speak with you all. I work at the West Los Angeles VA. I work with Anthony Young in the Transitional Housing Department, where we monitor and manage about 1,400 transitional housing beds throughout the community. And
Hello, I'm Senior Lead Officer Monique Contreras, and I have been an LAP officer for about 10 years. I am currently on loan from Community Relationship Division to Central Bureau, where I work with Commander Chamberlain, who is our citywide homeless coordinator. I am working on the development and implementation of our new homeless teams that we call HOPE teams, and that's our homeless outreach partnership endeavor teams that will be supporting the divisions, and that should be starting in mid-May. And I'll give you a little more detail after the introductions. I'm also assisting in the development of standardized training and protocol for officers. And just to give you a little bit of background of the division I came from, it's Community Relationship Division, and it's a division that was developed about 6-7 months ago to build positive relationships and trust between community and LAPD. It's investing in our future, and while I was there, I was a homeless liaison, and a role that I tried to take was how to help officers in divisions collaborate with homeless outreach providers, because as an officer, our biggest struggle is who do we turn to when an individual needs homeless outreach?
Hi, my name is Brooke Lykins, and I'm the Chief Development Officer at the Downtown Women's Center. I've been working specifically on the issue of homeless women since about 2005. The Downtown Women's Center is the only organization in Los Angeles that focuses uniquely on the needs of women only. So it's been a really interesting journey for us as the population of homeless women has grown over the last several years. And being able to offer a safe haven to women who've often experienced some quite horrific trauma in their lives is a real honor. And I'm honored to be with you here today. Thank you so much for your interest in this issue, and particularly your interest in women.
Hi, I'm Maureen. I work at OPCC. I'm also your outreach. Hi, can you hear?
And here.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Maureen. I work at OPCC and I'm part of the outreach team here in the Palisades. I have worked in treatment. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. I transferred over to the working with the homeless maybe about 4 years ago. I figured that I could do more good in the field that I am now, and it's been a great experience. I've met a lot of great people that are currently living within your community. And thank you for letting us in.
Thank you, everyone. Maureen, we'll start with you if you don't mind. It's a perfect segue. So you and the team of Maureen and Glenda have started working in the Palisades in January, right? So the first week was just getting to know the lay of the land, and then you started interacting with people. Can you tell us roughly how many people you think you've sort of touched base with and made some inroads into?
From then till now?
Yeah.
Over 100. We've made over 100 contacts. I can't give you the numbers right now, but we have a lot of people that are actively engaged with us, that we see all the time, that we know, that we communicate with, that sit down and talk to us, and receive services. The first couple of weeks we brought in to our shelter seven or 8 individuals, which at this time we have acquired vouchers for them, Section 8 vouchers, and right now I'm scrambling trying to help them get a place. We have 2 more that are coming up on getting allocated their vouchers in a couple of weeks. One that we refer to rapid rehousing, to be able, as long as he's stable, he is able to work. And we've linked people up to mental health services, brought people shoes.
Right.
Everything from shoes on up.
So just so everyone knows, the OPCC right now, as we speak, has at least 6, possibly 7 people with vouchers in hand for housing. They have at least 14 people enrolled in some sort of ongoing services, and Maureen and Glenda continue to make more connections. So the team of Maureen and Glenda is working, and of course we've been saying for the last year and a half that the task force has been active, that we're going to focus on services as well as enforcement. But as you've heard everyone say, from the officers at the LAPD over to these guys, really putting a dent in homelessness doesn't work unless there's an offer of services on hand, readily available, and that is what we're trying to offer here in the Palisades, and it sounds like it's working a little bit.
Well, we do. Like I said, we have linked people up to mental health services. We also have a nurse that comes out, not regularly, but she manages to get out here quite a bit to check up on people that we know really need medical attention. It becomes a challenge sometimes. We have to go searching. We're not beyond, throwing people in our cars and driving them wherever we got to take them. Whatever it's going to take to help another human being, that's pretty much where we're at. So our services are whatever is going to work.
The question we were going to pose to you, Maureen, just beyond what you've done in the Palisades, which has been remarkable, was what do you think is the most difficult barrier of getting homeless people off the streets in the Palisades, and is it different for women? Is the process of convincing them to take the services that you have on offer any different when it comes to women?
Women are, no, it's not. It just depends on the individual, I can't say that it's one particular thing that is the cause of why people are out there, but I can tell you that for women, a lot of them came from domestic violence situations. There was some kind of sexual abuse with them prior to becoming homeless. And then when they come out on the streets, they're victimized. they're victimized again. So they want to hide. They don't want anyone to really see them. They don't want to be noticed, especially by males. You know, it's a safety and security thing. So depending on where they've been, what kind of services they have, our shelters, OPCC shelters, are not like your typical shelters, you know. We pay a lot of attention to the females that come because we know what's going on with them. Although we do house both, we keep them separated. We have somebody that's monitoring so that the guys cannot like wander over to the female side. We do our best to give them a sense of safety and security while they're in our shelter. Because we know that there is a lot of trauma that goes with not just being a female, but being a female that is homeless on the street.
Brooke, maybe you can speak a little to that, because I know we talked about the fact that, you know, recognizing the fact that women on the street have a different sort of need has been slow in coming, and knowing that that recognition has been slow in coming, what kind of unique needs of women experiencing homelessness, knowing that I'm just going to tell you what I know, knowing that the recognition has been hard in coming, what are some of the needs that you see them most acutely kind of looking for when they come to you, and what's unique about your shelter that keeps women there and feeling safe and there for the long term, and then rehabilitates them? Because I think to some degree you have people who work and then pay a third of their income to be able to stay in your housing units, and so there is a measure of rehabilitation there that's unique to the people that stay with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Maureen put it really beautifully when she started talking about the impacts of complex trauma on homeless women. More than 60% are survivors of domestic violence, more than 50% are survivors of sexual assault, more than 40% are survivors of childhood violence. So if you add those numbers up, it equals more than 100%. Most people have experienced multiple forms of violence, and often, as Maureen said, that violence occurs before their experience of homelessness and then also afterwards. It's both a cause and a result. And the effects of complex trauma on the brain are substantial, and not just a behavioral health symptom, but an actual physical health symptom that can often cause people to behave in ways or make choices that are very hard to address or understand. So I think a more developed understanding of trauma, and at the Downtown Women's Center we use our largest umbrella of evidence-based practice is trauma-informed care. And I know that OPCC also practices trauma-informed care, which is one of the reasons women are also successful in their programs as well. And basically trauma-informed care shifts the service paradigm. When you're interacting with somebody who is behaving strangely or who you don't understand and they're making strange choices, the question is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you? Like, your behavior in this moment or your choice is a result of the experiences of your life, not a fundamental flaw, right? So you're not broken. You get to see yourself in a different light. As someone who's acting potentially in an incredibly rational way, given your personal experience. And then when you address a service to a woman who's experienced that level of trauma, in the idea of trauma-informed care, how do you give them choice and compassion in their service experience that avoids re-traumatizing or triggering them through their trauma experience? And that affects all elements of the service field. So it's in the way that you serve food. Do you want salad dressing? Do you not want salad dressing? Things as small as that can start to make someone feel in control of their lives again and not like victims anymore, and that can be a really powerful thing. So I think that that's a key need.
So that process of empowering women who come to you, have you seen it translate into their lives?
When you start to see yourself as a not broken person, but as a valuable person, is that you have something to contribute. And what we hear so much from women who are still in their journeys towards ending homelessness or have ended their homelessness is a desire for reciprocity.
women, and there's a fantastic researcher at USC doing a study on the goals of homeless people before and after moving into housing, and among women in particular, you see this goal of wanting to give back, wanting to offer something in return to the community in which they became stable.
So when it comes to funding at the Downtown Women's Center, you guys have a unique story because you help only women. Does that help? I mean, do you find that that's an interesting angle?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think in some ways it's prevented us from getting some funding because, you know, a lot of, especially the bigger government contracts, but we actually appreciate the fact that we're mostly privately funded because I think it allows us to be incredibly responsive to the needs of our clients. And then also I think there are certain homeless populations who are, for lack of a better term, more sympathetic. And, you know, I think women, because of their histories with violence and things like that, because of their lower rates of substance use, things along those lines, are sometimes a more sympathetic population, so it can help.
So I just want to give everyone a mental image of what the Downtown Women's Center looks like, or at least where it's located. So when you drive over, you drive through, they're really just barely on the outskirts of a few blocks where there's blanket homelessness. I mean, you drive through and it's just unbelievable to think that there are so many people on the streets with very few resources. You know, clearly people seem to be at their wits' end, and you drive through blocks of that, and then they're just on the edge, and then you park, and when you walk into the Downtown Women's Center, it really does seem like a refuge. It's a beautiful place. It's absolutely clean. It's very, very welcoming. There's the smell of food in the lobby when you come in, and so and all women are welcome. You know, some spend the night, but during the day, all women are welcome, and it's really quite a remarkable place, and it's very welcoming, and I think it's probably quite a refuge for quite a few people in the area.
Thank you. Yes, Skid Row is the most concentrated area of poverty in the entire United States. So it is a very extreme environment if you have never been. The Downtown Women's Center is incredibly welcoming and incredibly safe, and many women do see it as an oasis. And so do many volunteers. We have more than 5,000 volunteers a year, and we are very open door. We love welcoming community members, so if you'd like to stop by.
And just quickly, is there an equivalent to the Downtown Men's Center? I mean, is there something nearby for all?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like when you were in college and you were like, women's studies, why women's studies? Well, what about men's studies? And they tell you they call that history. I mean, many homeless services were designed for men, and for a long time wouldn't even admit women because they caused like problems. And even once they admitted women, the services were still designed for men, not with women in mind. So it's sort of similar to that.
How long has the Downtown Women's Center been there?
Since 1978. We are coming up on our 40-year anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Okay. Laura, I wonder if this would be a nice segue over to you, because I think that what brought you to this place had a lot to do with the fact that you were a new mom. So your experience as a woman and then observing another woman who was homeless and had an infant son had everything to do with you being here.
So it's funny to be at this event. I come here thinking, well, what are my qualifications? And one of the things that I'll back into that by saying I'm now a board member of PATH, which does a lot of the similar work, people assisting the homeless. How that happened is a story about a new mom, myself, out on a date night, and I was at the Santa Monica Promenade, going to see a movie with an infant son at home. He's now in the 9th grade, and so you know what it's like. There's lots of people out, and I noticed one woman with a stroller sitting on a bench with other folks around, and something about her stayed with me. It struck me as different. Couldn't stop thinking about her during the movie, and when it was over, we went back. I told my husband, we gotta just go see something. I just have to see something. And sure enough, she was still there, alone now, no one else around her, with her stroller. And I don't know why, but most of the time, the way we handle homeless people is maybe you say hello, maybe you don't, maybe you give them $1, maybe you don't, maybe you just ignore them. For some reason in this situation, It was probably the stroller, but we approached her and said, "What is your story?" And we found out that she was homeless. She outworn her welcome with friends, having stayed, couch surfing for a little while. And the thought of this woman and her baby outside that night, while we went home, where our baby was waiting with grandma in his new pajamas and his clean crib, was unbearable. And we thought, what do we do? All the things that you wish about the world. We could take her home. We've got a sofa bed. And we concluded, of course, we couldn't do that because we had a child at home. And we didn't know anything. Maybe she was mentally ill. Maybe she wasn't. But we did offer to take her to a motel for the night, and she accepted. So for one night, one measly night, we paid for her to have shelter. And the next day, I Googled homelessness in Los Angeles because I felt that I needed to do something more than just the little tiny Band-Aid that we had given her for the night. That led me to Beyond Shelter, which is now part of PATH. And their focus was on family homelessness. So the way the Downtown Women's Center focuses on women, their focus was on families. PATH's focus is broad on everyone, but they have sort of all their niches. And in volunteering with Beyond Shelter, which is what happened, I met many young women who were not unlike this woman, whether it was domestic violence, whether it was down on your luck, no safety net, no parents who could say, yeah, of course you can come home while you lost your job. I'm sure you'll be fine. These kids didn't have that. They grew up in foster care, and they had been out. I'm not sure how some of them got pregnant. And I was moved by their resilience, their determination. There was something about them that they did not want their children to be raised the way they had been raised. And they really made such an impression on me that years later I wrote a book. And they all became one character who was a young woman whose circumstances had led to be on the street with her child. One of the really important reasons why I wanted to write about that was to humanize the face of homelessness. Because what I had experienced working as a volunteer with Beyond Shelter was so different than what I had experienced just as a regular person walking around the street. The people that we normally see are people with a lot more difficult problems, whether it's mental illness or addiction. But I hadn't seen a person in these kinds of circumstances. And something about that I think was very important, so that now when I do see Timmy or Ruby or anyone else, one of my first thoughts is, she's someone's daughter. He's someone's baby. And as hard as it may be to look at somebody who maybe hasn't bathed or hasn't, treated themselves in the way that you want to have that somewhere in the back of your mind, to remember their humanity so that you can acknowledge their existence even, for me, that became something that I wanted to do and that I wanted to share because it was an important experience that I had had. Is there a question? I did just also want to mention, I'm was a board member at Kehillat Israel. One of the things that we did programmatically last year that I was not responsible for planning included this an event, an interfaith response to homelessness. And this brochure, I brought about 10 of them, had 50 things you can do to help. And it ranges from everything from volunteering at the Downtown Women's Center, or calling your assembly member about a particular piece of legislation that Western Center Law and Poverty might have, to go into the food bank. There are a lot of different ways people can get involved. I stay involved by one of the projects that PATH does is to help formerly homeless families move into a new apartment and help collect their food and furniture and linens. And there's so many different ways I think that regular folks, what I count myself as, that's regular folks, can help. We have professionals doing amazing work. And I think all of us, just by virtue of being here, have the inclination to try to see, well, what part can I play? So I think there's a lot of different roles each of us can play. Some of them are in here.
Thank you. Maureen, I'll go to one of the other panelists in a second, but I'm just wondering, how often is it effective to reconnect a homeless person, maybe not the chronic, but the newly homeless person, with existing family or an existing resource or infrastructure that's made up of friends or family that can take them in? I mean, does that happen often, or is that something they've turned away from by the time they're homeless?
It just depends. Some of these kids are on, 19, 20 years old or are on a great adventure. Their parents do know. We've met a lot of them out here that are passing through. Their parents do know they're from like Oklahoma and Idaho, and they have cell phones because their mothers are calling them periodically, and they're in groups. Some kids leave home because the situation is not okay. It's just not okay. So you can't, like I said before, you can't really pinpoint why a person is going to be where they're going to be.
So the myth that it's just a bus ticket home isn't always.
Some of them would like to go home. Some of them that live out of state, they come out here and it turned out to be not what they expected it was going to be, but now they're stuck out here. So and we can facilitate that. Let us get you back home. Some people are no, even though it isn't what they expected it was going to be. There's no going back.
Okay. Officer Contreras, I know that you do a lot of outreach within a lot of LA communities. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen homelessness change through the years, and what you see some of the solutions, some of the community-based solutions as being?
Sure. I just want to start by saying and emphasize that these are my personal experiences working within the homeless community. And my experiences are largely in Pacific Division, where I work the Venice Beach Detail. And if I can kind of go back to 2008, Venice Beach Detail was a very small group of officers that patrolled the beach area south on the south side of Washington, and then the north side would be Navy, and then everything west of Lincoln. And when I first came to the Venice Beach Detail, homelessness was present on the boardwalk, but it wasn't something that was an overwhelming issue for officers or community. The homelessness mainly consisted of older generation veterans, had some individuals with mental illness. There was absolutely no outreach or collaboration going on with LAPD and homeless service providers. There was no type of formal training beyond the academy for dealing with individuals with mental illness, and there definitely wasn't a standardized protocol for officers. So what did you see also during 2008 as a drug of choice on the boardwalk? It was marijuana. So you kind of fast forward, I kind of come and go to different assignments, and I'm back at Venice Beach. I'm now a training officer, and I get back, and the homeless population has exploded. Officers are overwhelmed, the community is overwhelmed, and now you see issues with drug abuse, not just being marijuana, but heroin and rock and methamphetamine, and you see the effects of that on the homeless population. The homeless population is now a younger generation, there's more females, and really officers didn't know or don't know how to handle those situations beyond enforcement. So I was working the shift that starts at 4 p.m. and ends at 2 in the morning. So my focus was mainly on the homeless community. I didn't have to worry too much about radio calls or the tourists anymore. It was just homeless community. And I listened to all the panels here because I can relate to some of it. I wasn't humanizing some of the individuals there. It was kind of like, they're always out here, they're always causing problems, enforcement, and so forth. And what really kind of changed my perspective is we had a homeless female, about 20 years old, and we were working with a pastor at the time. He was our only source of outreach. And when I initially saw her, I thought, oh my gosh, she's one of these guys out here, she got herself pregnant, why is she out here? And continued to kind of talk to her every day, brought the pastor out there, and just kind of got her life story. And what was so meaningful to me is that we actually connected her with, her family and her dad, and were able to transport her back home. And I thought, okay, there is a solution, there is a possibility. I should have been out there every day saying, why are you out here, enforcing, you can't sleep here, you can't do this. And so the biggest problem we see is officers not really understanding that collaboration part of the time. And I was approached then to work on a project or a pilot program with Department of Mental Health, and it was their SB82 program, the homeless outreach program. And it really was very successful because here now I have an option to reach out to somebody who I can say, hey, listen, I have this individual who's been staying with me for 2 years. How can I reach out? How can I help? And that kind of spun off. We started working with outreach workers who have, and then the pastor, and so TMH, and those all kind of spun. But the problem is that may have been happening in Pacific, but what was happening in all 21 divisions? Because that SB82 program may not have been initiated there. The Laura's Law may not have been brought to that location. So I then go to Community Relationship Division, and I kind of go to every division. I start with West Bureau because I'm citywide and it was too large. So I go to West Bureau and I go to every single division. I say, what are you doing with homeless outreach? And you have some that have a full car, and you have some that have a transient car, and some are using the slows, which is an overwhelming thing for a senior lead officer to handle. To just focus just on homeless issues as a senior lead officer is asking a whole lot because they have to deal with all the other quality of life issues as well. So I thought, okay, well, where can I start with this? So I started, educating myself on the CES meetings, on really meeting with people from homeless outreach groups and so forth, and just bringing the officers and the homeless providers together. And I was working on that project and hoping to elaborate, but then I got asked to assist Commander Chamberlain. And so there's a lot of huge projects coming down the road for LAPD. And one that I'd like to talk about is these homeless teams that are being developed. And what it is so West LA is part of West Bureau. So West Bureau will get 10 officers and 1 sergeant that will support all the divisions within West Bureau. And this will continue for the other 4 bureaus as well. And these teams are connected to sanitation, watershed, LASA, and Department of Mental Health and the city attorneys. And our goal is to have these LASA outreach workers given housing, shelter, options, have sanitation, assist in cleanup of these encampments. I know a lot of you have seen that 5611 has been enacted, and that's something that sanitation is been control of. And so the teams will be implemented mid-May, and we're hoping, I know there's going to be a rough start, there's going to be a transition period where we're learning, but we're hoping that this will really support the hardest hit areas with encampments and crime, and just maybe providing that outreach that some areas are not getting. Something else that we want to do is we really want to educate officers, and one way we're doing that is through e-learning, which is our computer-based learning, but also doing a hands-on approach. So we take your senior lead officer more, and we'll take him to Central Division that has a dense population of homeless individuals, and we'll have them work with the homeless outreach officers there called Reset. And then you'll take that Reset officer and you'll put him in Slow Moore's position, and just so they can kind of see, okay, what can West LA do to to reach out to homeless service providers. What can they do as far as enforcement? And just to really have every single officer be on the same page.
So every of the 4 divisions, there would be a team of 10.
Well, no, there's 21 divisions and there's 4 bureaus.
So every division gets a team of 10 or every bureau?
Every bureau will get a team of 10 and 1 sergeant.
And then deployed based on need?
Yes, we're really, there's so many things in progress right now. One of the things that we want to do is work with sanitation. And sanitation really has these amazing maps where they can kind of pinpoint based on if you call 311 where your highest concentration of encampments are, your hardest hit homeless areas. And that's going to kind of determine where these teams will work together in.
And then in a place like the Palisades where we have services available and on offer, they would work together with the local solution.
Right. We don't want to take away what's happening within the divisions. We want to let the homeless providers in those divisions continue to do what they're doing, continue to work with the SLO. It's too difficult for a team that's bureau-wide to go, okay, well now I'm in West LA, who are my service providers? Now I'm in the Pacific Division. So we chose LASA, and we want LASA to work with those homeless providers that are in each division separately. So are you asking me if there's an enforcement section for people sleeping in their cars currently?
No, I know that it's okay for them to sleep in their cars. I was wondering about the crime element.
You know, I can't give you numbers or statistics, but, you know, in some situations you can say, yes, it can contribute to the crime element. Do we want them to stay in your schools? Absolutely not. Do we want the kids to have to see things that they should be seeing? Absolutely not. But I mean, it depends, it's different on every situation, and officers do, in different divisions, you know, address the situation as needed. But at the moment, it is something that an officer has no enforceable section for, and people are allowed to sleep in their vehicles.
Right. If the tags, I know the registration, if it's off, then you can get reported.
Yes, I mean,
and if it's been parked for more than 3 days, it can get towed.
There are different things that you can do as opposed to say just stopping someone for sleeping in their car. There are different sections that you can use to remove that RV.
I'm not sure. You probably read about this in the news as well, but other organizations, I think one synagogue in West LA was proposing that their parking lot could be used for something like that. So, is that something the Palisades wants to look at? Why not?
I think
So-
there's something in Santa Monica that they were thinking about that too. Along the.
But I mean, as it is now, if a Palisadian were to see a high concentration of RVs and be uncomfortable, there would be no way to call you, right, Officer Moore? There would be nothing to cite or anything to say. So I wonder if we could evolve to a point where we could say, you know, these RVs can't be parked within so many feet from a school, or some sort of parameter where it isn't illegal, of course, but maybe there's some quality of life issues that can be factored in. But for now, we can't call you. Got that?
Thank you.
Nancy? I'll come over with you. Nancy Niles.
Thank you all for being here. Quick question, I'm not sure, maybe Maureen could answer. The percentage of female homelessness in Pacific Palisades, I'm generally in the village walking. I don't see the beach population as much, but it seems it's a very small number of women relative to the many, many young men you see sort of clustered in various places. So either a number or a percentage, do you have that?
No, I don't have either one, but I can tell you that it is much, much lower than their male counterparts here in the Palisades.
And how many are you in contact with that are female? You said you have relationships with a number of them relative to the number of men.
Maybe about a dozen.
Females
Yeah.
versus the men?
Well, you figure we've made about over 100 contacts. That's just contacts. That's included the people that we engage with every single day, as well as the ones that we have seen in passing. and the ones that refuse to talk to us. And the percentage, I would say it's a good 90% male as opposed to female out there.
Thank
Like
you.
I said, a lot of the females don't, they're with males, they have another male with them, or they come out to do what they do, and then they go right back to wherever they're hanging out at.
They appear very, very timid. The regulars in the village are very, very timid, the females. And somebody said the question asked, what's happened to you? I think
Yeah, that's the big question.
that really
you ask them.
strikes a chord with me, because especially with the women that we can relate to, it's like, what did happen to, because, they look healthy and young in many ways, but, it's a rough life for them, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot harder on the streets for a female to make it than it is for a man.
Maureen, are they more receptive to your offer of services? Or are the reactions the same?
No, I mean, but women are in general, once if they know you're genuine, then you can get a conversation out of them. If they're willing to talk to you, if there's something that you can relate with them, they're willing to start opening up and to let you know, like, this is where I'm at and this is what happened.
I believe I'm correct when I say that you've already transitioned one woman out of homelessness in the Palisades, and she's taking classes at Santa Monica College and has high hopes for the future, right?
Yeah. Me and her went out yesterday looking for an apartment.
Wonderful. That's a clap.
On the statistics question, one of the issues that I think we see in women's homelessness is that there's actually no answer to your question, and the reason is that a lot of homeless data is not disaggregated by gender. So while we know that about 30% of the homeless individuals in this county of Los Angeles are adult unaccompanied women, so that's women who don't have their children with them, we don't know what their unique ethnic breakdown is as opposed to men. We don't know what their unique SPA distribution or council district distribution is as opposed to men. They don't disaggregate the data by gender, which I believe they are going to try to do this year, but also nationally we can't. All of the data that goes into the HMIS systems, because they're designed uniquely by each continuum of care, roll up to HUD, but because the continuums of care aren't required to be able to disaggregate by gender, nationally we have all of this data on homelessness but can't find out what the unique needs of women are. And one of them, in the small studies that have been done, has shown that women are also more likely to be hidden. So this report that's coming out of USC is showing that before moving into housing, men were much more likely to be staying in shelters or in service communities, whereas women were much more likely to be avoiding mainstream services and doing things like sleeping in cars. Or a lot of women are also offered temporary shelter in exchange for sex.
Over on this side, yeah, please go ahead. And then Nancy after that.
Anyway, I had a very quick question. I'd like to know about the relative, the age of the homeless population. Is it getting younger? Is it getting older? As time goes on, what do you see in the Palisades and some of the national statistics?
The trend towards getting younger?
There's a researcher, Dennis Calhoun, who I think is out of Harvard, and he's doing a bunch of studies on what he calls the cohort effect in homelessness. Basically, there is, if you look at an age distribution of homeless individuals, 30 years ago, you saw them sort of bubbling around their 20s, and 20 years ago around their 30s, and now around their 50s. So there's a large number of people who've been homeless for a really long time who have been sort of chronically in and out of homelessness almost for their entire lives. What's scary that he's finding is that the economic conditions around the time of that big increase in advent and homelessness 30 years ago
The economic conditions were incredibly similar to the economic conditions in 2008 and 2009. So you're also seeing a smaller bubble. So now what you're actually looking at is a little lump in the 20s and then another big lump in the 50s. So for older folks, it's a lot about like aging and health-related issues. Your average person who's been chronically homeless who's 50 has the health of a 70-year-old. Whereas in the younger population, getting them connected to rapid rehousing or connected to the job market early, because what this research is finding is if people don't connect to the job market early, sometimes they never can overcome that. So that's some of what that research has been finding.
Maureen, here in the Palisades, we have quite a few of our male homeless population is in their 50s or above. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this may seem like a silly question, but do they see themselves as being homeless, or is at that point, after 20 years of living out of a home, do they just see that as the way that they live?
Yes, they do. They say this is the way that they live, this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be.
Nancy?
Two questions. One, first for Maureen.
The first, is it working?
Yeah.
Would you mind explaining to me exactly the numbers? I'm a little confused. Like, how many exactly have been placed into housing per se?
We're working on
Okay.
the permanent side. We brought them into our shelters, several shelters.
So they're in shelters.
Yeah,
Right.
there's 4
So-
of them at Turning Point, 3 of them are at San Michelle.
Okay, so 7 are in shelters, right? And then another 7 have vouchers?
No. Those ones we're actually.
Okay, that's what I was confused
Yeah.
about.
So if I could just interject for a second, and Sharon's at your table, so you can have this conversation offline if you want with Sharon. But we do, so just so everyone knows, the Pacific Palisades Task Force on Homelessness has a mechanism in place to be able to monitor and get a report from the OPCC and the work of our amazing team of Glenda and Maureen. And we have gotten our first set of results back for the first quarter, but we're meeting with them on Friday, and Sharon Browning at your table is actually heading that effort. We're meeting with them on Friday, we're going over that information, and then of course we're going to make it public to the entire community, and we will do that every single month because we're going to get a report every month. But I don't know that Maureen is here today prepared, or even that she knows all that information. So I'm going to leave to Sharon Browning to determine when we're going to share that. But it is out there, and in broad strokes, I can tell you all that 6 or 7 people have vouchers in hand. At least 14 people are now engaged in ongoing services.
I was just wondering if we could define ongoing services.
I can do
Sure.
that.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
That is still in process.
Okay.
We're doing some cutting edge stuff here and really trying to
track data. Maureen and Glenda don't do the data. There's someone else that does the data at OPCC. And we're trying to take these very complicated metrics that they use and put it in language that we would all understand. And we're trying to come up with some sort of a format, and it may not be possible to really track people moving through the system, because you can tell listening to Maureen, there's stages. You engage and you get services and you move them in to a shelter, and then you wait for your voucher, and then you find your apartment. So all of this, our team has to make happen. They are working to work each one of these individuals through all of those hurdles to get them into housing. So we're trying to come up with figure out how could we start to graphically show this. So as a snapshot, you want to know how many do we have where in this continuum. We hope to be able to tell you that soon, but nobody else is doing it this way. So this community is really forcing and asking for some new ways of looking at this. Wrong answer, sorry.
No, it was perfect. And just to sort of put an exclamation point on what Sharon just said, the dozen or so people, it's more than a dozen, who are engaged in ongoing services basically means that those people, aside from the people who are now on a track for a housing plan, in addition to them, these 12 and 14 people have begun to accept services. So as a benchmark for us, for this community that's invested in this strategy of services coupled with enforcement, it is working. People are accepting services. It's in incremental stages, as Sharon says, but they've entered the system, and so they've entered that process of transitioning out of homelessness, which we think is positive.
Another question. Somebody was talking about families and if they were in contact with it. I was wondering, are there families looking for their loved ones that might be homeless? And is there any
I could write you a story about someone.
Yeah, I was thinking like how with Find the Children they had great websites. I was wondering if there's any kind of websites that might help families track their loved ones that have become homeless and they can't find them due to mental illness or drug and alcohol addiction.
You know, I think there's a lot of privacy issues that come up when people start doing that, and especially from the healthcare perspective from us, you know, when we get calls from families, we can't divulge anything. And so I assume that a lot of, if people are entering into programs, they have similar privacy rules and laws around that.
I think a couple things. There's an organization for missing and exploited children, right? So people can, that has a huge database. You bring to mind Safe Place for Youth in Venice, which is a lot of teenagers who have a touch point. So I don't know that there is a large database, but I would think that they could find, I think they might be in California. Let's Google where the youth are. But I think it's an excellent idea that the agencies perhaps are working together.
I'm sure you're right about the privacy. But I'm sure you're right about the privacy issues, but I bet that there could be like a one-way situation where you could say to someone, there's a family member trying to find you, would you be open to talking to them? Just a thought, just food for thought.
Just to kind of share my experience, we do have parents and we do have family members that approach us. I used to work Venice Beach a lot. And we would have just on our, for our personal knowledge, we would put all this up in our substation. And we have them connected some, and some are out there every day, looking. And it is tough because you want to help them. I've had one that she was a missing juvenile, and we connected her with her family, and she's an adult now, and she's now willingly homeless and wants to live on the boardwalk. So I've seen kind of both sides of it. I see the family struggle. I also have a lot of people who follow my Twitter that post who's missing in certain areas. They know that I used to work at Venice Beach, so they'll post, hey, this person's there. So that kind of reminds me if I do see them. But besides, the website that she mentioned, for us it was just that local information that was before we come out there.
Yeah, I would just say people do contact us, and probably OPCC as well, looking for loved ones sometimes, and we will make, that one-way offer of just like we can't disclose anything, but if we do know the person they're asking about, we will tell them. Sadly, a lot of times women say to us they can't go back. Yeah.
Okay. Last week I heard an astounding statistic from the city manager of Santa Monica talking about the fire department of Santa Monica, and he said that they had 15,000 calls in Santa Monica to the fire department, and out of them only 47 involved fires. They paid $36 million a year for the fire department. So what does that have to do with this? I'm wondering, he said that 20% of the calls that go to the fire department are because of what he called downed homeless, which is basically people calling in to 911 and saying, I see this person passed out, or I see this person and they need medical assistance. That's been, now I'm talking just as a resident of the Palisades. So what he said is that they can't do, when the fire department shows up there, if they're not breathing, they can revive them. If they're having a heart attack, they can revive them. If they have emphysema, can't help, kind of a chronic condition. If they're kind of passed out because they're drunk, can't really help them. So my question is, it sounds like we have a lot of resources out there. I don't know how long people can stay in shelter, but I'm wondering how much, I don't hear any health, physical health issues that people have. And I know, you're out there working with people. A lot of times that is the key that will draw people in. That's safe, that's medical, that's the one to help. And what I don't see here is people that are first responders to health issues, or how much are you involved, does mental health connect people to physical health? How do people living on the street who have chronic health conditions, and if people are 50, what are we doing there? Are we using this? Are we connected, or is this an area that needs connection? Sorry for going on soapbox, but
that was a great question, and I think as it applies locally, and I think everyone in this room is probably more concerned with how that question applies locally. Maybe Maureen can talk about the fact that you guys do have a nurse that is part of, she assists you, right? So she's not out there on the streets with you in Glenda every day. And Glenda, you're welcome to speak to this too. But you do have a nurse that is part of your team and readily available, and she does come out sometimes, and she has interacted with some people.
Yeah, we do. We have a couple of nurses that work for OPCC that do come out periodically. And if we do really feel that somebody needs to be evaluated right then and there, we just call them and they come out. As far as people utilizing medical services, a lot of times, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of times that is the last on their list. Is their own personal health. Right now, me and Glenda are struggling with a gentleman that we know is really, really ill. And strategizing, trying to figure out how are we going to get this guy, how are we going to pull him in. Maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. Let's try this, let's try that. Like I said, that's a lot of times that's the last on their list is their medical, their own well-being, as personal well-being. Until it gets to a point where you do see them on the ground, and then the paramedics do have to come out and transport them to the hospital, take them into the emergency room. And sometimes that's where it winds up. We have the ability though, is to try and set appointments with them with the doctor and transport them to get some medical care, just to even get, a physical that they haven't had in 20 years.
And then do they come back onto the street?
Of course.
I mean, the county does have a program. What you're talking about in terms of the public costs of emergency health services is something that is very present in the county's mind right now. And also on the national level, the economic roundtable did a report on the costs. So right now, one of the biggest providers of housing in Los Angeles is the Department of Health Services, because they realized to give someone a permanent home and an intensive case manager cost them $18,000 a year. But for a chronically homeless person, having them go through what you're describing so vividly is astronomically more expensive. And so they're just like, well, the best investment we can make in a homeless person's health is a home. And so they just started paying for that, which has been fantastic to see. And they're housing, I think now over 1,000 people in the Housing for Health program through the county, which has been cool.
So, Glenda, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so OPCC has what they call our wellness bid program, and we have about 15 bids in one of our shelter and about 12 to 15 in another shelter. So we work closely with St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, UCLA, to get people that are having acute or chronic health conditions into those wellness beds. And it could be simply somebody that's homeless that is got to have a colonoscopy. They can come into shelter and get a bed overnight just so they can have that procedure done. So we are working on their health issues at the same time that we're trying to stabilize them and move them into housing. We also work closely with Venice Family Clinic. They're a satellite in most of our projects, at least 2 of our projects. Venice Family Clinic has a satellite in those offices. So they're at the Access Center. Monday through Friday, they're getting care. Those unsheltered people that are coming in, those people that are in our wellness programs, they're getting care. And most of the time, they're being referred to the best physicians, the best specialists out there. So we are addressing those health issues. And like Maureen said, sometimes that's the last thing that they're thinking about. We've got individuals that we know have pancreatic cancer out there, but we can't get them in. Yeah, we also have an on-site nurse that works with them. And also OPCC did a pilot project maybe about a year ago where we actually worked in St. John's emergency room. So as people would come into the emergency room, there would be myself or an RN on site that would go and talk to them and make sure that they knew about the services. So we were able to talk to the nurses, and they didn't know about a lot of services, so they were glad to have us there. So we are concentrating in that area.
Thank you, Glenda. And then I don't know if you can answer this question, but if you can, I know that there was a homeless person here in the Pacific Palisades that did get transported to the hospital and stayed there for a few days. Was he then able to be transitioned out of homelessness? Did he accept care at some point after that, or did he stay in the hospital and come back? And if you can't answer, just don't answer.
So unfortunately, his situation is a unique situation. He is still receiving care in the hospital, and we are seeing progress.
Okay. So, and you're in touch with him. Thank you, Glenda. Thank you for everything that you do on our streets. Question? Sure. And then Faye, and then you, and then Kristen.
I have a question. If you see a homeless person passed out on the sidewalk, so you would have to call 911 at that point if you're concerned, right? I mean, I know you're talking about where the fire department is deluged by phone calls not related to fires, and I actually think that's been that way for a long time because houses don't burn down anymore. Most of the time that fireman comes to your house, it's because you had a heart attack or something like that. But if you see a homeless man or woman passed out on the sidewalk, you would call 911, right? Or the fire department?
I'll let you guys answer this in a more professional way than I possibly can, but on a local level, you're right. Palisadians do often call 911, and they do often ask for the fire department to respond to a homeless person that doesn't seem to be conscious, and they have responded to those. When they get there, if that homeless person is technically okay by whatever definition is handed to the fire department in the modern day, they literally don't and can't do anything. They go back, and they will complain to me or someone else about how many calls they get, but they work within the legal definition of what they can and can't address, and it's a pretty narrow definition. So I agree with you. Most of the time they show up and they leave.
But in some situations, they are very needed, and so it's important to call if you think that someone is really in danger.
This might go without saying, but all of us at the VA were trained in CPR. So one of the things, though, is too, you can ask if they're okay because they could just be asleep, you know. So or not. I mean, it depends on your training and what you feel, comfortable doing.
Patrick Hart, let's all.
You've been waiting with the microphone, then we'll get to that.
Officer Contreras, I work with Maureen Rivas almost every day, and I'm really excited to hear about your division with the LAPD. My question is, most people don't realize that the LA County Sheriffs are right over the border, and a lot of our homeless come from their territory into ours every day. Also, the bus lines, all of the bus lines in Los Angeles are done by either the Metro Sheriffs or the county, or the Metro Sheriff's Division. So my question is twofold. Number one, is there someone similar in your position with the Metro Sheriffs or the county sheriffs to your knowledge? And number two, I'm so glad that LASA is coming out after so many years. I saw them 11 years ago out with outreach workers on the streets, and my understanding was they were originally formed to be a county city organization, and it sounds to me from everything I've heard lately that you're getting more cooperation between the county and the city. So do you have a counterpart to your knowledge in the Sheriff's Department and Metro Sheriffs?
You know, that is not something that we're currently working on right now or collaborating with at the moment. I know that every entity has their form of how they deal with homeless outreach, but specifically with the sheriffs, to my knowledge at this point, though, there's no collaboration as far as how they're handling and how we're handling things in a entirely different way, so I couldn't answer to what or how they're solving those issues.
Faye, did you have a question?
I do have a question, yeah.
I'd like to know, as a member of this community, what's your job when we see they're doing something wrong? Like, for example, yesterday was my second time seeing that in an armorial drive right in front of Farmica. This guy was completely exposed and being run by the tree. I was just thanking God that's 10 a.m. and there's no kids from village around. Do we look around and the other way and walk out away, or what can we do? I mean, the other time he was peeing at that Pepsi trash can in front of Garden Cafe. The only thing I did, I called Jane, I said, please wash that trash can.
Who did you call?
The owner.
Oh, okay. So I think that Glenda and Maureen know who you're talking about, but I wonder, Officer Moore, since we're lucky enough to still have you here, if we do see something like that, what do we do?
You can call it in, but the biggest problem is that the officer has to observe that violation in order to take any action. So if a police officer isn't right there to see it happen, there's not a lot we can do after the fact. We can talk to the person, warn them against it, but it's, you know, it's one of those laws that we actually have to observe. You can videotape and show it to us, and there's still not anything that we can do beyond, you know, unless we personally observe it. Don't videotape.
But Officer Moore, I feel like I've heard you say over and over again to always call in these, what's the other word for something when it's illegal? Is to always call these incidents in and to stay on the phone and make sure that it gets registered as having occurred. Is that?
Yes, and that's because LAPD is number driven. So the calls actually help keep officers in the area.
So the more violations we're calling in with, the more likely it is that we'll get more resources or time. Okay. And maybe Maureen and Glenda, you guys probably know who she's talking about. Is he amenable to services? Has he been receptive? Does he listen? Is he interested in any kind of services? I mean, he's been on the street for quite a while.
Well, there's one person that comes to mind who's refusing services. He's not accepting any services, and yeah, there's one gentleman that comes to mind, and he's not accepting any services. He says he likes being homeless on the streets.
He's also a veteran.
He is also a veteran.
And 68 years old.
Yeah.
Bruce talks to him. I mean, so Bruce knows who he is.
I think most of us do. The VA is trying to get him to go in. He refuses any kind of service.
And that's where you guys call service resistant?
Yes.
But I understand you get to them after all.
Eventually. We're looking for that little crack in the door.
Right.
Yeah, we always wait for the opening.
It comes, it eventually comes.
Not all times, but a lot of times. Yeah, we wait for the opening.
I just
sort of anecdotally, I wanted to share that these are really tough issues. What do you do when somebody is maybe dying on the street in front of you? What do you do when you see someone urinating in front of you? One of the speakers that I heard at the health issue at PATH, a woman who'd been homeless herself, she was a naval officer. Her husband had died, she'd become homeless. When she was on her path to recovery and becoming housed again, she was describing being at the San Diego Convention Center, and she had a job there. And she saw somebody, like you described, just passed out on the step to the convention center, and there was a big convention going on, lots of people back and forth, and just totally assuming maybe drunk, something, not stopping, not talking, because they didn't maybe feel safe, which is another aspect, is that you have to trust your own gut about what feels right to you and what you are capable of. But having been in that homeless situation before, she felt an extra call to it, and she leaned down and said, "Are you okay?" And the person said, "No, I need help." And in that particular situation, she was able to get this person medical help that they needed. It's not always that clear, and sometimes it's clearly the other, but I wanted to share that because it's something that even, every one of us wonders about, and sometimes you really can make a huge difference.
And Brooke, that's a little bit of the reciprocity that you were talking about, that women who come out of homelessness have a need to go back and help the people who still are in homelessness.